Exactly.
Cool. Now, I want to address this next one before we start. We're on to number 6, Vimeo people, Drew J. Moore's entry. This was one of 2 that have, prior to being in the contest, questionable running times or questionable duration of sabers. This one was too short.
I see.
Originally, and people voted to let it go in. So this is in the contest, and it gets judged evenly as the rest of them are, and that's not our job to screen them. However, here's the email I got from him, and I want to, since it's such a short entry, I want to go into this first so we can have an eye on that.
Right.
After editing, I had just over 1 minute of short film with maybe 4 seconds of lit saber action, too short by a large margin for the contest. So I recut the piece a dozen different ways, finally settling upon a series of pulses, repeating detailed images highlighting each sequential beat in the choreography. Putting faded out sections between with the right sound gave me a trailer feel that seems just right, like a misdirection that sells for the longer form of the film without giving away the real ending. And those pauses also serve to burn the images into the mind of the viewer and carry them through into the next barrage of images with a good sense of exactly what's going on. Shall we?
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, M. Night Shyamalan's writing one of those for his next movie too.
Cool.
I want that guy. I want him to write the back of my DVD, though.
Yeah,
I totally do.
I want to write my obituary. Jesus.
So that being said, Vimeo people, 3, 2, 1, unpause.
They just spent a bunch of time bashing M. Night in the chat, so that probably had more teeth than it meant to.
Yeah.
But
So here we go.
Somebody says Fig looks homeless.
which is funny because we're in his home.
And that you're smoking a hookah.
That's part of it. It's great.
The death of 1,000 wounds begins with a single. No, it could really. The first wound could really kill you.
Yeah, the first one can do it.
The 40th.
Now this is clone work, which is nice.
I
it
had no idea the first time I watched
it's very
I
it's
didn't
very
notice it was
clean.
clones either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if I ever got that.
I don't really know what's happening.
Yeah.
Like,
this is one guy.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's one guy fighting
With
himself.
cloning. Well, all right then. So we get, that's huge. That's not easy at all.
He's keeping the camera moving a lot throughout it, which I appreciate. There's a lot of camera motion, a lot of zooms, which is more difficult to get around. The camera motion you can fake a little bit, but the zooms like that, not so much. So that's pretty impressive.
And there it was.
Yeah, and that's the fight.
It's an awesome effects demo. There's some great effects work going on throughout, and that's we have to absolutely give props for that.
Cool. Well, that was the entry.
Yeah.
Brian Finifter.
Yeah, I totally missed that it was a clone the first time through, which is actually a point in its favor, because you never, just in the same way, you don't want to write to show people what kind of an awesome writer you are, or act really hard so people say what an awesome actor you are. You don't want your effects to ever wave their hands around and go, look at these awesome effects that I'm doing. You want the effects to serve the story and hopefully be invisible to everything else.
Right.
As George Lucas once said, I'm just kidding.
So in that sense, it's actually a good point in its favor. It did a complicated effect, and I never once, even at least my first time through, questioned the fact that it was an effect.
Right.
Trey?
Yeah, and I actually absolutely have something positive to say. Is and as the email pointed out is, well, I guess he the entrant Drew shot some stuff, realized that there was a problem with it, and then tried to creatively work around, like, well, how can I make this into an entry?
Yeah.
And then was willing to submit it and show it, and knowing that there would probably be some comments about it. These are all hard things to do, and it's something, again, it never stops, no matter what level you get. And if you want to do this for a living and continue it, no matter what level you get, Chris Nolan was sitting in the looking at Inception, going, "Oh, this moment doesn't work at all. What are we going to do?"
Yeah.
I guarantee you, it never ends. So it's a great learning experience to have a film that you have to kind of change your mind about what it was going to be after you start to put it together, because it didn't come out the way you wanted it to. And I give huge points for coming up with a way to make something out of what was essentially about 5 shots.
I totally agree with that. Brian?
Definitely, but similar to the other one where I said basically the same thing. It's kind of like, well, that's all cool, but I didn't read any of that stuff before I watched it. I'm still going to evaluate it as just, here it is, I'm watching it, and what did I think of it? And I think I kind of like the idea of it, of really, really examining every single nuance and move of a very small amount of choreography, but I don't think the complexity of the choreography here really warranted that exploration, and so instead it felt it felt repetitious, and it felt like it actually had a very sort of confusing nature to it, where I was not exactly. It actually ended up being more confusing to me.
You don't have enough time to figure out what's going on. It's interesting because in a couple of entries, number 8, we see stuff that's similar to that in Jedi Pastor's entry. Dorkman?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. It's like it was meant to really hone in and focus and get a hyper close look at each small move. But again, in part probably because that wasn't the plan and he had to make that work. I think it actually serves the opposite purpose and makes it a little more difficult to follow, because with each cut you're like, is that a different thing? Oh no, that was this. Okay, wait. So what and again, you're kind of distracted by it, and yeah, it's a great effects work and a great example of solving problems in editing. But as a lightsaber choreography entry, I don't think it doesn't have enough to show for that.
Right.
It's got a lot going on elsewhere, but for the purposes of this competition, I don't think it's quite enough.
Do you sympathize as someone who has also had his arm cut off by a lightsaber?
Yes. But he had both, so it's even worse.
You're having some PTSD.
He's never going to
exactly.
play the guitar
Oh,
again.
God.
Eddie Doty.
Again, certainly I applaud. I edit for a living, and I love the idea of using editing to save your ass, because I am forced to do it sort of daily. But the thing I would say is that I liked sort of what you're going for with a relatively quick sequence. It's more Iaido than Kendo in the sense that it's just a couple strokes and then the thing's over. I'm a sucker for that stuff. With that said, I would, if you want to do stuff like that, either to this particular entrant or to anybody in general, I would recommend watching some early Kurosawa. I would recommend watching the Samurai trilogy with Toshiro Mifune, because you can really see how you can stage a relatively short fight sequence and yet have it really, you can draw it out with some of your cutaways and your establishings and your angle choices, and you can really build the tension so that when you have those relatively few movements, you can really take people's breath away with the amount of tension underneath it.
Take their breath away.